Zach Evnesh here with the Iron Roots podcast, brought to you by Play. Friends, folks, fellow meatheads, we're 15 feet away from the highway as we stand in front of the famous York Barbell Hall of Fame Museum. During these next few episodes, we are going to be taking you down the ultimate trip through memory lane of iron history, talking to you about the greats from the 70s, 60s, all the way down to the 30s. And remember, if you're listening, you're only catching half of this podcast. You gotta see what we're gonna be showing by video. We're taking you inside the Hall of Fame Museum, photos that have not been shared before. So make sure you watch it at plae.pro, play.pro. I'm pumped up for this, guys, so get your old school weight gain shake ready. Whole milk, ice cream, banana, honey, peanut butter, and anything else that'll make you get jacked. We'll see you guys inside play.pro. This is Play's Iron Roots, a podcast dedicated to uncovering the strength legends, the training methods, and the stories around physical culture and iron history. I'm your host, Zach Evnesh. Grab yourself a protein shake, chalk up, and prepare to travel back in time through some of the most awe-inspiring stories of iron history. It's go time.
On this episode of the Iron Roots podcast, Zach continues his conversation with Jan Dellinger at the York Barbell Museum.
What was like some of the, for you and your experiences, like the best supplement? They had like crash weight gain, liver tablets was big, all this stuff. And there was such a mystique behind everything that I wonder, some of it must have been psychological. You felt like, I'm drinking this shake, I'm just gonna get so strong now.
Well, I'll tell you, one product we had was protein from the sea. Which was wicked stuff.
Like tasting bad tasting.
Well, that and if you were anywhere, if you happened to be anywhere near a bathroom where somebody was excreting that stuff, I mean, it was horrible. I mean, this is before my time, but lifters told me, say, "Oh God."
And was it a good seller? Did people buy it?
Oh yeah, for a while, and then he took it off the market. People, it had a relatively short cycle of sales because of this. It was horrible tasting. It was great protein. I mean, as far as just protein content, it was great. But it was stuff, you know, even if you mixed it with like ice cream.
I was just gonna say the weight gain shakes back then, when they would like when I looked through the magazines, it was always milk, banana, peanut butter, ice cream, honey, calories. And there, I can't remember the article, but it may have been like one of the Keys to Progress articles. Yes, and you know what's really interesting is, I'd say in like the past, I mean, it actually started when I first started. One of the first kids I trained, he was a wrestler. He had to be held back a grade because the lightest wrestling weight class was 103. He weighed like 83, and I still remember like having that bodybuilding knowledge and reading the old magazines. I still get a lot of these kids that they're gonna enter high school. Right. They're gonna wrestle at this 103-pound weight class. Now it's 106, but they're 20 pounds undersized. I go back and I say, I'm gonna share with your parents this old weight gain shake. I go, your dad probably read about it, and it's like you're gonna have milk, ice cream, honey, dried oats in there, banana, peanut butter. And I said, you know what that shake is called? It's called living the dream, because you can't do that when you get older. Right. But that stuff is what is great for the guys that can't gain weight.
Right. But like you said, if you go back into the Weeder magazines, a lot of the early York magazine, it was people gain weight oriented. Mine was like, once in a great while, there was at least 5 of those kinds of articles to every one of, you know, hey, you're fat, you know, let's do something.
Yeah, and then any of the toning articles seemed to be like for the women, specifically for the women. Everything else was based around gain muscle, get strong, and build confidence. Well, you know, I keep all of these magazines with hopes that like when my son gets older, that he'll just find his way into the office and like fall asleep on the floor reading all that stuff, because I grew up reading Flex magazine, and you mentioned that like Bob the people eventually learned, like, Bob's not writing these articles. And I remember reading Flex.
But Bob wrote everything up to, I'll say into the 1960s.
And then who wrote the articles from there? Was it John? Was it you? Was it interviewing others?
Cameron, I'm sure, had the same job. Maybe Gord Venables was a very good lifter, athletic guy, all-around athletic guy.
Yep.
Who died in 1974.
Okay.
I'm sure he did a lot of that stuff. Gord was a very good draftsman, artist, pen and ink artist, and well-read.
Was he the one that, when we look at the ads, many of the ads are like a sketch of like somebody, they're just beautiful. I always say, like, there's one ad that says, like, pack your muscles full of dynamite, and it's a guy doing like
the dynamite coming out of the arm. Yeah.
Is that
very possibly? Very possible.
The drawings are just amazing. I mean, they pull you right in.
I think I figured this out, and I don't care if it's York, I don't care if it's Weeder.
Sure.
Any of these guys, go back to Lederman and mail order courses, they had some very talented all-around guy.
Right.
That could write, that could draw, that could maybe even like do drafting, design equipment and things like that. Various kinds of artwork, painting. Gord was that guy here. A guy like E.M. Orlick would have been Weeder's guy for a while. I don't know to what extent. Jowett had that aura about him as far as a writer, but I'm sure Milo had somebody on staff that did that stuff.
Sure.
But a lot of, and there's some other guys that sort of freelance. They would send some to York, send some to Iron Man, things like that.
Yeah.
But you often had to have somebody. Charlie Smith would have been another. I don't know about his artistic ability, but his writing ability, because Weeder had boxing and wrestling magazines. He had several kinds of magazines. We had boxing and wrestling magazines that in the early 1950s that Smith was involved with. Bodybuilding magazines. Yeah, there's about 2 years worth. And sometimes you can, I think it was called Boxing and Wrestling. Then I think Stan Weston brought them out. But yeah, they're collectible, very collectible, and you can find them on like
eBay. Sure, yeah, eBay. What's been interesting with how I've gotten the majority of my muscular development and strength and health magazines is people gave them to me. They were guys that had read them when they were kids and in their young adulthood, but they knew I would really, So somebody mailed me a box from Chicago, and then another guy gave me like a shopping bag of some friends of ours, like Dr. Ken VHS tapes, the original Dino Files from Brooks Cubic, and then of course, strength and health magazines. So they gifted them to me, and I always say, like, this stuff finds me. And we were talking about equipment earlier, Jan, like the different plates. And some of my early, actually like the first YMCA I trained at, had all York dumbbells, York plates. It had the York isometric rack. So I want to talk about the equipment that York was building. I'm not sure when that started, but even to this day, if you go on Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, 2 weeks ago I picked up York bumpers that might be before I was born. People are still trying to buy the older, like that York equipment is older than I am, or right about my age. That's like 4 decades worth. I mean, it's not, it hasn't broke. It's still like the best stuff out there. That
was, if you looked at the best commercial grade stuff, the bars, the plates, 1 or 2 of the benches, things like that, they did offer really stout products. Well, again, it was for Olympic, the bars and plates for Olympic lifting. They had to meet certain specs, so they just, because they used them in the international competition.
Right.
They just had to meet certain specs. I also know back in the days when I would travel around here and there, one place I remember we went was in Quantico at the FBI headquarters.
Yeah, I've been there.
And they had bars that had been there, used by every Tom, Dick, and Harry under the sun. The knurling was almost had to be re-knurled. But the bars were fine, they still worked, the plates were good, and you're not going to get imported bars and plates that stand up like that. Yes, you have to pay more for that, but if you're going to have a sustained, ongoing establishment like a YMCA, like a training facility installation like that, serious people training, you want stuff that you don't have to keep buying it.
Think about this, the bumpers I have that I picked up, you said they might be from 74, 75. That means 40, that's 43 years old, and they're still, now I've got them. I've got...
and you showed me the picture, they were used.
Oh, yeah.
These are like original paint.
Oh yeah, they've been used. I've got York dumbbells, and I had a friend that had a company that would go and basically clean out gyms that were going out of business. Or if it was like a pro team or a university, when they'd get a new staff, they'd get rid of the equipment. And so he gave me 60s up to 100s of the York, not the globe dumbbells, but they were called, that's the round heads. So how old are those round heads about, do you know? 3 decades?
7?
If you're talking about the bun style round
Buns,
heads.
yep.
Oh no, they're not, I know, they're not the buns, they're almost like, they're the round heads, but I know the buns are kind of shaped like hamburger buns.
Yeah, or something like
Yeah, these are more almost like, not a square, but they're almost squared off.
Easily
Trying to
20 years,
think.
right? Easily.
Yeah, 25 years, yeah.
Yeah, think about that. So I always look at stuff, I go, okay, if this thing costed me $500, looking back, it's costing me less than $1 a month.
Yeah, and you got it forever. I mean, unless,
forever.
Yeah, one thing in my gym that I showed to Richard Soren, it's a 150-pound globe dumbbell, but there's no brand on it. And you mentioned that like you had come across some old wide flang plates that didn't have the York on it. So I wonder if like this dumbbell I have was a York dumbbell that made its way to like those circus days when they would hold circus strongman, or what was in not Staten Island, Coney Island. It's a 150-pound globe, but doesn't have a brand on it.
I'm guessing. Well, remember they had like the Travis Bell out here.
Yep.
There's no brand on it, but we know it was Travis Bell's, and the Good brothers had something similar to that.
Where were the Travis bells from?
New York. He had the bucks to have it like personalized, customized.
Gotcha.
And some of these guys could have been professional strongmen, had that dumbbell, because
Right.
one of the things that they did was a bent press in those days.
Yes.
And that was, you had to have some skill at that, but still, I mean, a guy who had some size and some background bent pressing could do the 150 pounds.
That was, yeah. There haven't been too many. I think there's been 2 or 3 guys since I've had it since 2007 that have gotten it over their head.
Well, if you can do it, that's pretty good. I don't care how you do
I'm
it.
not messing with you.
Yeah, that's pretty darn good.
So when you were working on the magazines, Jan, what did you know about the, I didn't realize how, when we're done doing the interview, we're going to get like some video footage, but this is a huge company. There's a lot going on here with equipment. So were you ever seeing them making the plates? I even know Dr. Ken had Iron Island plates made, which I've got a pair.
He called me up and said, I'd like to, when he hadn't bought Iron Island Gym for too long, or hadn't had it for too long. He said, what about these custom plate things? I'd like to get some Iron Island plates. And so we discussed the logo and how he wanted them.
They look
That was
just
fine.
like the York.
And then I said, what color do you want them? Crocus. I thought he was kidding me.
It's like a purple, yeah. Why? What was his?
I don't know if Kathy, all right, I can't probably tell you one of the things. He said a bunch of things, but anyway, he said, I think Kathy liked them, or he said that crocus is our color. Crocus. All right, so I'm going to have to get out the color wheel here, but anyway, so I did, and we got plates that satisfied, and there was a minimum. I mean, you had to buy.
I think it was like 220 pairs he got, something like that, if I read
I
correct.
think you had to buy at least 145-pound custom plates. Had to make it worthwhile,
Right.
because we had to do the pattern for it
Who
first.
else did you do custom plates
Oh,
for?
a number of schools,
Like
the Naval Academy.
Of course.
Let's see, we did University of Hawaii. That's the Rainbow Warriors.
What the shipping of that must have been tremendous.
The interesting thing about the pattern is they have those rainbows.
Yes.
There's, 5, 6 colors?
Right.
So you have to be very intricately, they can't all be on the same level, those colors. Very minutely, just the first one, down just millimeter, and then do another stripe, and then 5 or 6 of those.
Amazing. So the university had the money for that.
Yeah, and then, like you said, ship it to Hawaii. Wow.
When was that? Because I know.
I think it was the 1980s.
1980s. Was Bill Starr strength coach there back then? Do you know?
No.
Okay.
Bill Starr was back in Baltimore at that point.
At Johns Hopkins.
Well, he tried to transfer back and forth between Baltimore and Texas.
Okay.
Yeah, he'd go visit his friend Tom Suggs down there in Texas.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
yeah, but he was also, I know he was a strength coach at Johns Hopkins about 2000.
Okay.
And I forget when he got the job, I don't know, sometime in the late 1980s, I think.
Okay.
Which was still fairly new. You know, that was a new profession, being a strength coach. I think roundabout when you started working at York, was Johnny Parker even a strength coach in the 70s?
Yeah,
it was like mid 70s.
Mississippi.
Okay.
Somewhere down there. And he was developing a few, I'll call them disciples, guys like Al Miller,
Sure.
who wanted to do this, and nice guys.
Yep.
And they sort of found their way through this, first
Right.
at colleges and then at the pros. Now, Johnny was lucky. He got attached at the hip to Bill Parcells. And he got hired at the Giants. When Parcells went to New England, he went with him. Parcells went somewhere else, he went with him. Johnny's limitation was his wife was a professional educator, and I mean like a college dean or something like that. So
Okay.
he had to match her work with his and things
Yeah.
like that. But yeah, Johnny did pretty well for himself. I had a couple of conversations with Johnny over the years. Dick Smith, who was our resident coach and also a salesperson here and a general jack of all trades, we got a real good rapport with Johnny Parker. In fact, Johnny Parker and a few other guys, Al Vermeil, a few other guys,
legend.
would call Dick up frequently.
To talk about training.
Yes. Well, see, Dick,
Where would
Dick would have a lot of contact with the Soviet athletes, with like the big weightlifters.
There are some articles that we featured during one of our episodes in, I think, Strength and Health, maybe it was MD, but it was like about how the Soviets were training.
Yeah, that was always the big.
It was the 60s maybe.
Oh yeah. We were starting to get some of their. They were getting really like just be the team to beat.
Yes.
And they started out with some of their ex-lifters. Medvedev had some periodization literature out there, which still gets quoted.
They had special exercise. They were showing like the good morning with...
Vorobiev, yeah, was.
I wonder if that's where Grimmick started picking up on his good morning, because they showed photos of their good mornings with their legs totally locked out.
Some Europeans did this in general. They liked the good mornings a lot. Bill Starr liked the good mornings. I think he picked it up from them. You found some of the European lifters liked it with straight legs. Some of them liked it with bent legs. Power lifters do it. It's almost another squat. But it's a very common exercise.
Right.
And yeah, that was the big secret because, well, let's face it, in the 40s and into the early 50s, it was USA lifters.
Yep.
It was the Egyptians for a while in the 40s, then it was us for maybe about 10 years. Then the Soviets started coming on and beating it. So we were, Huffman, we have to raise young men to beat them, and so on and so forth. So that was the big curiosity.
Was he very inspired to like make America strong? Was that a big...
Well, that was one of these things. It was a good for business, first of all.
Did he ever hold like company meetings and say, this is where we got to focus our writing on?
My time, not my time. He's pretty much led from the pages of Strength and Health magazine in that regard, because I think even in the 60s he was still writing a lot of his own World Weightlifting Championship reports and things like that. I'm sure they got edited, but he was writing, he had the commentary and the tidbits and was still plugged into it. By the 70s, late 60s, 70s, he was starting to drift.
Thank you for supporting the Iron Roots podcast, brought to you by Play.
To see this episode and all the other educational resources brought to you by Play, go to play.pro, Plae.pro. You're going to love it, and we'll see you next time.